I could think of no one more well-informed, experienced, and for me, representative of the life of a musician than having with me Timothy Adams, who was considered one of the iconic percussionists, teachers, and most importantly, he's one of the great human beings that I know. And welcome. So nice of you to be with us.
Thank you. I spoke to Jonathan about doing this, and I had done a similar kind of class 2 summers ago at Aspen. And I essentially just told the students my career, something that typically a lot of young players never get a chance to know, and even their teachers, they don't think to ask. But I started playing when I was 7. My dad was a band director. And then when I was 8, I studied with a student teacher of his. And then from the time I was 9 until I was 17, I studied with Bill Wilder, who was a percussionist, assistant timpanist of the Atlanta Symphony. And then my junior and senior year of high school, I studied with Paul Yontich, who was a timpanist at the time of the Atlanta Symphony. In the 8th grade was the very first Atlanta Youth Symphony. Jack Bell was the coach. And so I remember the second master class or so, I raised my hand and I asked, did he play percussion for a living? And he said, yes. I went, oh, okay. Did he more class? Then I raised my hand again. He said, yes, Tim. I said, do you not have to teach or do anything but play percussion? He goes, yes. I went, okay. 10 minutes later, I raised my hand again. He goes, yes, Tim. I said, I just want to make sure that I heard you, that you play percussion for a living and you don't have to teach, but you teach because you choose to. He goes, yes. I went, okay, thanks. So I went home that night and said to my parents that I want to play in a major orchestra when I grow up. And so my desire to play in an orchestra was not one that the music moved me, that I went, oh, I want to play in an orchestra. It's just that it was strictly a career choice and basically economic at 13. And so once I got myself on that path, you know, that was my focus throughout high school. I played in jazz band and marching band and the whole deal, but I wanted to play in an orchestra. And then I started studying with Paul my junior year, and it was terrific. I mean, I was always frustrated because I could never please him. That made my dad very happy that I was always frustrated. And then my senior year, I started playing extra with the Atlanta Symphony. So the first concert I played Mahler 5, I played woodblock and tam tam. And, I heard, Paul's playing calf. And so he plays a solo in the recapitulation of the first movement. Ticket-a-bum, 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 then ba-da-dee. And we played ba-ba-ba on the E. I looked up and thought, well, okay, it's amazing. And then, of course, the rest of it was great. Bum, 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 then bum, 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 from G minor to F minor. And then at the very end, he got my attention again, beam, ba, ba, bum, 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 then beam, bugga-digga-ding, B flat, that note. For some reason, I snapped my head again, and I thought, I don't know what it was about that note or how he played it. It grabbed my attention again. And then a few months later, I played Don Juan with him. And after the horn call, he plays his G roll. And then after the concert, I said, Paul, who did you study with? Because we never really talked about it. I said, who did you study with? He said, Cloyd Duff. I said, where does he teach? He says, at Cleveland Institute of Music. I went, okay, that's where I want to go. So I went home and told my parents, I want to go CIM. I want to sound like Paul. So the reason I went to CIM was I wanted to sound like Paul. And I got in and, and I was there for 4 years. I studied my first 2 years with Mr. Duff. And then my 3rd year, I studied with Rich Weiner. And then my 4th year with Paul. Paul came to Cleveland the beginning of my junior year. And the summer before my junior year, I was the timpanist of the Atlanta Symphony when Paul moved to Cleveland. So he told ASO to hire me to play timpani when he went to the Cleveland Orchestra. So I was the timpanist for the symphony between my sophomore and junior year summers. And then, I studied when I finished with Paul, my senior year, I wanted to go back and study with him more. He says, no, I won't teach you anymore. But then that year also started this band called Exotic Birds with Tom Freer and Andy Kubashevsky. So then I did that for 3 years. We had a video on MTV and in VH1. I played keyboards and bass guitar poorly. But we played 3 and 4 nights a week, all originals. We had 40 tunes. And, we were working for all the big British bands at the time. And so I did that, and I did a lot of studio work. I played drums, percussion, and I sang. And I sang in tune, and I sang in time, which a lot of singers couldn't do. So I worked, so 50% of the money that I made in studio work was singing. So I would do a session, I would sing, and then I play drums, and I play percussion. So I'd be in the studio 8 hours a day, 3 or 4 days a week, as well as being in the rock band. So I put the sticks down for 2 years, and I didn't practice for 2 years. But my senior year, CIM, I got a temporary job in the Canton Symphony. So I was playing Canton that year, senior year, 2 years out with Canton Symphony and the Exotic Birds. Then the Exotic Birds broke up, and then I went to graduate school. I started in January. Then I went to Tanglewood, and then I started my grad degree after that. And I did CIM for 2 years instead of with Richard Weiner. And then I went to Tanglewood 2 years and got invited back a third time, but didn't go because I got my job in Florida. So at CIM, I studied 3 years of percussion, 3 years of timpani. And I did that because I wanted to get a job. I didn't want to be broke. So I didn't really care what I played. I just wanted to work. And I just happened to win a timpani job first, and I just kept doing it. And then it started to appeal to me because, if something goes wrong, it's me. There's no accountability to anyone else. And I knew that I couldn't play section with, I couldn't play under another principal player other than Richard Weiner. And I couldn't be assistant timpanist unless it was Paul or Big Firth. So I just made the decision, I'm going to play timpani. And, I was fortunate. I got a job in Florida Philharmonic. I stayed there for 4 years. Then I got a job in the Indianapolis Symphony, stayed there for 4 years. Then I played in the Pittsburgh Symphony for 15 years, and then I quit. And during that time, in Indianapolis, I played a lot of drums. And there are people in Indianapolis who never knew that I was a timpanist in the orchestra because I played in a quartet that played 3 nights a week. So the orchestra would end at 10:15, and then at 10:30, I'd be at the club swinging till like 2:30 or 3. And I did that for 4 years. And then during that time, I was going to quit, and I was going to be a jazz musician. And my dad talked me out of that. My dad talked me out of not quitting 3 of my jobs. I didn't tell him I was going to quit Pittsburgh because I knew he talked me out of that, so I just didn't tell him. But, he taught me out of quitting 3 of my jobs. He was always like my sensei, the cat who was honest enough to tell me the truth and help me navigate, being an orchestra musician. And so, in Pittsburgh, I did a lot of things. I did a couple movie soundtracks with Terrence Blanchard and Spike Lee, and played on like 5 funk records, and played a lot of solo stuff. Wrote a percussion and violin concerto for the concert master and I in 2007. Played a concerto at Pittsburgh that James Oliveira wrote for me. It was like for 4 timpani, a miniature xylophone, and 4 prayer bowls. And so I played 3 in this hand and 4 in the timpani, and pedaling 5, that kind of thing. And then the second movement was like 9 hand drums. And the last movement was vibes, 2 timpani, Glock, and something at 3 triangles, and a whole bunch of stuff. And so that was cool. And every orchestra I played a concerto. I had a concerto written for me in Indianapolis, and it was a 3-movement percussion concerto. And then in Indianapolis, and then in Florida, I played the Crescent. So every orchestra I played a concerto, and I play a lot of recitals. I like to play. And even though I played timpani, I didn't consider myself a timpani player. It's just how I made money. And, I just kept doing it. I was fortunate, and, I won 4 timpani jobs, a percussion job, Eastern Music Festival in 3 teaching jobs. So, I was blessed, but, I worked hard. I was very fortunate. My parents got me training early, and, I was very serious about playing. I loved it and had a good sense of humility about it because my teachers were extremely humble. I loved them. Cloyd Duff, I told him there's no one I respected more than my father other than him. So these men had a lot of integrity, and same with Richard Weiner. I mean, it was about his family and the orchestra. That's it. And so they were really terrific role models for me. They weren't ego driven, but they could play. But they were only concerned about doing well for their family and playing well in the orchestra. And the same with Paul. He had a drum company. He just had a lot of passion for making drums and drumsticks because in Atlanta, he had a cabinet company. I don't know what the hell he was doing that for. He just loved to do things. So he had a cabinet company and he was playing timpani in the orchestra. So I was very fortunate. And then my teacher, Bill Wilder, I studied with him. I was 9 and he was 22. So we grew up together. He's like a brother to me. And he was a great drum set player in the orchestra and played percussion in Indianapolis. I played a lot of drums, but I couldn't play fast. I just couldn't do it. So for a year, I used to go to this jam session. And every time the guy before me was like right here, the next person like this. And every time I sat down, Perez would go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I'm like, oh shit. Oh, sorry. Oh shoot. And in 10, 15 minutes, every single time I sat there, I'm thinking, do you not like me? But we got along good. But every time I got there, it would be that kind of tempo. Let's say it's September. And then about February, the end of February, he goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I went, and I was there. And he's like, oh. And from that day on, I got even more jazz gigs. So, he helped me and I thanked him. And I never asked why he did it, but I'm glad he did. And I think a lot of it, he wanted to see if my ego as an orchestra musician could take the humility of not being able to do something in public. And that's one thing that Winton and I used to talk about. He said, man, look, if you want to be a great musician, you have to have the courage to sound sad in public in order to get better. And so if you have that kind of humility and you're willing to like really struggle in front of people, you get better quickly. And that's something I always carried throughout my career, that I was never afraid to sound bad. I mean, I was pretty consistent. I did well throughout my career, but I was never really afraid to take a chance. So in Pittsburgh, every 2 years, I would change my technique. Students would come back and like, oh, you did it again. I'm like, yeah, man, I would just change it just so I would stay challenged. I would literally change. I would just change something. And that'd be like 2 years, like struggling. I didn't sound sad, but I mean, I felt like Mr. Duff told me, he says, I want you to take what I gave you and make it better. So I really took those words to heart. And so I made a conscious decision that I'm going to push myself every year, every couple of years to do something different. That being said, I also would always think musicians, especially orchestra musicians, were very arrogant. It's like you get a job, then it's almost as if you don't take lessons anymore, like you can't be taught. But then the greatest tennis players and golfers have coaches their entire career. So how is it that I get a big orchestra job and I can't, and I'm too good to get help? So when I got my job in Florida, I flew Mr. Duff and his wife to stay with me for a week. I sat him right next to my case. So I turned around and pick up a stick and he'd give me a note and I turned back around and play. Then he came to every concert, gave me notes for all. Then I flew him to Indianapolis. Then I flew him to Pittsburgh. And he would stay with me for a week and he'd come to every rehearsal. I sit him on the stage and I turn around, he go, okay, make sure you lift in the soft rolls. Okay, I turn around and do whatever he said. And it would be the same thing in concerts. He'd come up with notes and I would do it. And it was really motivating to me to get checked. I mean, so I didn't have an ego like that. I mean, I wanted to get better because I knew when Paul was in Atlanta, because he told me if he was having a problem with his loud roll, he would fly to Cleveland on a Saturday morning, take a lesson with Duff, and then fly back for the Saturday night concert. So I was ingrained. All these good habits were ingrained in me, to get better. and to get help when you needed it. So one thing I would encourage you to do is to have no ego. If you don't know something, ask somebody. It doesn't make you less of a musician or less of a person. It makes you a great player. It's because the fact that you want to get better and you're always hungry for knowledge, and anybody can teach you, even someone that's younger than you. Then the last thing, one thing that was so poignant about Cloyd Duff's and my relationship was when he was in Pittsburgh, one rehearsal he didn't go to. And when I got back from rehearsal, he was going through my library, and I had a lot of books. And most of my books are on Black history and racial issues and civil rights and all this stuff. And he came back, he had a book in his hand. He looked at me and he says, "It hasn't been easy for you, has it?" I went, "No, it hasn't." He said, "Man, I'm very proud of you." And I was very touched by that. I was extremely touched by that. And typically when I tell that story, I start crying, so I'm doing pretty good today. But it really showed the depth of his humanity to try to understand something that he did not have any reason to understand. And it gave me a real snapshot into how he played and my other teachers, how they played. And when I was in school, the Cleveland Orchestra had a sense of humanity for us as players to make sure we were good at our craft. So it really instilled life lessons for me as a human.
When you were in those high school days, those formative years, and where you are now, did you follow the path and the plan that you thought you were going to follow in high school, or did it turn out to be something vastly different? Or
I was very fortunate. I mean, I was blessed. Everything worked out exactly how I wanted it to work out. I mean, in terms of the trajectory. I mean, I played in a metropolitan orchestra, a regional orchestra, a major orchestra, then a bigger major orchestra. I mean, in Pittsburgh, I think I went to Europe 30 times, played in Carnegie Hall 30 times. That was like the real deal. And the thing that I did not expect. Yeah, I should have. I mean, I checked all the boxes. I went to school. I was a good player. I was competitive, but at the end of the day, I didn't get paid the same as my white colleagues playing principal positions, and that's the reason I quit. Because I've been fighting for a better contract. And I had a buddy of mine who was a big attorney, huge attorney from DC. He came and he negotiated my contract, and in 20 minutes, I got a $30,000 raise. And after that, I'm like, I'm out. In my mind, I said, expletive, I'm done. And then I quit. I mean, so it really was, that was tough, because I'm from the South. I mean, I was born in the segregation schools, integrated when I was in the 4th grade. I mean, I saw Martin Luther King's body laying state when I was 7. Integration in my town was very smooth. It worked great because people communicated and spoke to each other, no problem. But, I mean, I did this interview with Josh Jones and Michael Stern 2 weeks ago for the Kansas City Symphony. And I said, man, look, I played in Pittsburgh for 15 years. At least twice a month, someone would ask me to park their car on my way to the orchestra. And I know they're coming to see me. I know they are. And then, at least 3 times a week for 15 years, I would leave the parking lot, get on the elevator, and I'm dressed like, I got like people's mortgage on my back. And the white women would grab their purse and go to the corner. And I did that. And I experienced that for 15 years. And Josh was like, well, unfortunately for me, Josh is like 27. He goes, yeah, I've been in Canada. People have asked me to park my car. That's the part that, even as open as the arts are, it's still a small microcosm of America. And, navigating that as a Black man was rough. I mean, I never had any prejudice because I could play. So it was unequivocal that I would deserve to be there. And they certainly, a white orchestra was certainly not going to give a Black man a principal position. So I could play. And that was unequivocal. So I never really had any problems that way. Never. People didn't say anything crazy to me. It was always beautiful. I loved all my orchestras, especially Pittsburgh Symphony. I just loved them. Just the people. We just got along great as a unit. I loved them. But, management is management. And it's what it is. and America's America. And so hopefully those things will eventually change. And there are a lot of African Americans now who are principals in orchestras. So they're getting paid, equally as well as their white counterparts. But that's the reality. That was my reality. So that's the part, Jonathan, that I knew was the case, and I was a fighter the whole time. But after 31 years, I got sick of the fight. So, I was done. And so I didn't have a problem quitting because I had skills. I could play some drums, I could play hand drums, I could write music. I mean, I wasn't concerned about being broke. So one thing I would recommend all you guys, be able to do more than play the drums. I wouldn't say I'm a percussionist or a timpanist. If you're a percussionist, play everything. Don't be a percussionist and sound sad on timpani. I would just change that. There's no reason to not take every audition. You should take every audition. Otherwise, you will be broke. Don't fool yourself. Well, I'm a great timpanist. You need to pick up a snare drum stick. There are more percussion auditions than timpani auditions. One other thing I recommend to you guys is, be open to change. I mean, don't be stuck. Just be open to change. If you decide you want to do something else, go do that. Go do something else. I mean, no one's writing the rules but you. But the thing I would recommend is be good at it. Be extremely good at it and be humble. Don't be a jerk about it. Because remember, somebody's better than you somewhere, and younger. Always remember that. One thing Rich Wader used to always say, he says, you need to practice because when you're sleeping, somebody in China's practicing. He was for real about it, so it really, that drive and work ethic really helped me. But back to your original, Jonathan, everything worked out. That's the part that I thought would improve. And for me, it did not improve. But for other African Americans who play in orchestras who are principals, I'm sure it's better. I haven't rapped to Jovan about it or anybody, but I'm not sure what happened with Mike Crusoe and Raina Carroll. But I know for me, that's how it ended. But I wasn't mad about it. It's just that I had principles and I had integrity. That's the one thing my mother taught me. And I had self-respect. So if I felt like that was being violated, I'm done. I don't need it. There's no amount of money that will make me stay somewhere that I felt like that my integrity was not being respected. And so that being said, I also had skills. That's one thing that you have to make sure that you're good. Don't quit. Don't be emotional. I mean, when I quit, I was not emotional. I was very, very calm about it. I wasn't like, oh, no, I just went, all right, it's time to go. I was very calm. I just left. I didn't retire. I just quit. So that is the way that I wanted to do it. And ironically enough, people were calling around. I remember people would call Bill Wilder, and Bill Wilder said, well, actually, when Tim came home Thanksgiving, his freshman year, I asked how school was. He said he loved it. But this is when I was 18. He said that he would never retire in an orchestra because it felt strange to have a career on raised funds. That just never sat right with me. I thought that was like the weirdest thing in the world because I thought, what happens if everybody stops wanting to hear classical music? Then I'm broke? No, I can't do this. I mean, so in the back of my mind, I always knew that I would never retire in it. And that's just my story. And that's just how I lived in it. And I've always kind of done my own thing. Because at the end of the day, it's just a job. I mean, it's a coveted job. There's no question about it. But there, I always thought, I'm like the meat cutter in Kroger, except I want to be good at it. So I didn't feel like it was a highbrow kind of, I'm a classical musician. That's BS. Man, people can play better than you. So I was very utilitarian about it. It's like I'm a mechanic, and I deal with these spark plugs, and I deal with the engine in the back. And it really helped me have a very happy life in the orchestra. Really happy. I mean, I dug it. It's a great life. If you can get it, it's awesome. Because nobody really knows what you're doing. Nobody knows the kind of money you make. It's like you're Batman. Nobody really gets it. Your neighbors don't get it. You leave in the morning, come back. It's like weird. You leave at night and you come back for like 2 hours, and then you go away for a month and you can still pay your mortgage. Everything is like wrong about it. you know, because I always told people, I never told people what I did or what I made because I figured I get beat up because it just doesn't make any sense. You work 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 in the afternoon, Tuesday, Wednesday, then Thursday for 2.5, play a 2-hour concert. Thursday, off Friday, play Friday night, off Saturday, play Saturday night, Sunday off and do it again. That's not right. Just everything is wrong about that. So that's one thing I loved about being an orchestra musician, that it was very cool because it was, nobody really understood it, but you weren't broke. So I dug it. I really loved playing in orchestra, and it just opened so many other doors, and yeah, it was great.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. I'm fortunate to have heard parts of it before, and hearing it again is even better the second time around and third time around. So thank you for that. My question is, you talk a lot about how even though you set a goal for yourself within that, there were a lot of different twists and turns, as you said, but ultimately you knew where you wanted to be. And my question ultimately is how you planned your workload, your practice to get to where you wanted to be. Because you can take any instrument alone and there's an unbelievable amount of work to be done on that. You take the repertoire, unbelievable amount just within timpani, then all the percussion rep. I mean, it goes on and on and on, such a long-term project. And one thing I've been trying to figure out right now is how to manage my time to be both short-term and set goals, but also keeping in mind where I would like to be in the future.
Right. Yeah, I can answer that. I'll answer it 2 ways. I'll answer it pre-quitting classical music to be in a rock band. So pre-quitting, I spent as much time listening to the repertoire as playing it, whether it's percussion or timpani. I spent more time playing etudes than the repertoire. That's for timpani. I played a lot of etudes. I made sure that I can actually play the timpani extremely well, as opposed to playing excerpts, because you need more facility than required to have nuance in your playing as a timpani player. You need an insane amount of facility. So I started to interview timpani players. Every great timpanist was a great snare drummer. Duff was a rudimental snare drummer. Dick Brooks was a great snare drummer. Fred Hingham was a great snare drummer. So that's something that I always played 2 or 3 hours of snare drum 7 days a week for 28 years, because it's a small muscle group that gives you the color in your sound and makes you never overplay because you have an excessive amount of facility, right? So that's what you do for timpani. You spend as much time knowing the repertoire, because every time you strike the drum, you want to know exactly why you're hitting it. You're not playing a lot of notes. So they're substantive, they're important, but you have to have a lot of facility to make sure they're clear every time. You have to go for extreme clarity. You want to play timpani like a snare drum. And that kind of control makes you sound like the music. That's timpani. Percussion. I would not practice excerpts. I would play that green book and learn how to play the xylophone, play the xylophone, because I know a lot of people that play excerpts, and people just take mallets, snare, xylophone, and glock. People start playing excerpts when they're freshmen, and then let's say they win a job, but they always have a problem of getting tenure, because those pieces that you learn, you don't play all those pieces. You might play those pieces over 20 years. Some pieces you never touch. You might play sorcerers once in 30 years. But you spend all that time shedding sorcerers, but you play a lot of pops, and you have no time, and the music comes 2 days before, and basically everything looks like John Williams, depending on where you end up, but you can't read. So I would spend a lot of time with green and a lot of time reading, being able to sight read. Because the reality is the orchestra excerpts are easy. They become hard because you go through this psychological BS at 18 that they're hard. It's easy. And it's only like 20 bars are the longest ones anyway. They're typically short, but if you have a lot of facility, you can play all your scales and modes. Then you can look at chord and go, this is basically like F sharp, major, then it's like kind of a flat this, and then things start to look different to you. That's malice. I would spend more time playing duets with somebody that's better than you. That's what I did. someone that's better than you, play a lot of green, learn all the rags from memory, be able to be like a xylophone virtuoso. Then the excerpts are very easy. And I would never learn just excerpts. I would know the entire parts. That's what I was taught at CIM. With all the lessons with Rich Weiner and Cloyd Duff, we played every note of every piece. So with Rich, I probably knew 60 pieces, top to bottom. And same with Duff, top to bottom. We did every note. We did a lot of music. And so, and then for snare drum, look, snare drum auditions are only soft playing. That's it. You play loud like 3 times, really. Capriccio is not loud. Scheherazade is not loud. Shostakovich's 10 is loud. Everything else is basically mano forte and below, right? So with snares, we want to have really good rhythm. There are only so many rhythms there's only like 30 rhythms that you will play in your life. A dotted eighth, 1 dotted quarter, eighth note, 2/16, 2/68. I mean, I can write out a sheet. So I would practice this sheet every day. I would just practice this sheet of rhythms. And then I would never really practice snare drum excerpts. They're not hard. That's like 6th grade rhythms. It's not difficult. But I would play a lot of grace notes. I would play 100 loud and 100 soft 4/4 roughs, every permutation. 100 roughs, loud, 100 rough, soft, right and left. Slams, right and left. Okay, so grace notes, checked. And then I would work on, I would roll. I would just roll for a minute loud, minute soft, go back and forth for 20 minutes, take a break. I would just work on the extremities of things. You always want to have more facility than you need. And then snare drum, I would just read. I play a lot of etudes. There are 3 or 4 David Cruz books, know all of them, know all the Pratt books, all 3 of them, know both, be able to play all 3 Peters books, know both Case Clariana, know all this music, be able to read on the snare drum, have great facility so your rhythm is not stiff. I hear a lot of grown people playing in orchestra, they play snare drum, they're not playing with anybody because they can't really play the snare drum. They can play excerpts. That's just my opinion. So that to me is what you want to spend a lot of times when you play snare drum. Play all the Tompkins solos. I mean, have some feel to your playing. And then toys, takes tambourine and play everything you play on snare drum on the tambourine. And then on cymbals, play everything in Intermediate Peters book on cymbals. Same with bass drum, same with triangle. One thing Rich Weiner always said to me, and it's still true, you win a percussion audition on the toys. Every time. Nobody leaves my, they play such great snare drum. Nobody talks about the snare drum. It's like, everybody can do that. Everybody can't play triangle and tambourine. They can't do it. I've been to festivals like, what? Or they can't play bass drum. They can't play cymbals. Pick up a cymbal, play cymbal 1 hour a day with just 20s. Put 17s down. My child can play 17. Do everything with 20s, everything. The heaviest 20s in the school, use that. You have to. But one thing Rich Winter used to say before I got there, he says, I want machines, not musicians. What he meant by that was, you want an excessive amount of facility on all the instruments. If you want to say you're a percussionist, you just stay in the room, but you do a lot of technique, and then you listen a lot. And then the repertoire, just read it every now and then. Why would you play Scheherazade 20 times a day for 4 years? And you can't read dot, digga, 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 dot, digga, 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 dot, digga, 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 dot, bop, 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 bop. My son plays bolero every day perfectly. He's 4. So why would you even practice? You know what I mean? When you start to look at it, it's kind of crazy what you end up doing. You end up not really being a great musician and being able to express yourself on percussion. You end up being an excerpt player that sounds stiff. Like Michael Stern said, the reason Josh Jones won was it was the way he played the end of La Mer. It's touch. Everything is always touch and nuance. So then you don't have a lot of then it's not so overwhelming because you know the music. Then when you do practice the pieces, you bring in the right feel and sound and nuance to it. So you have to practice it a lot. And you go back and play more etudes, and you read more, and you learn the De La Cruz xylophone etude. You want to be an expert. People that can really play. like Will Hudgens. He can play mallets, like for real. He is no joke. Yeah, but he plays jazz. He can play the instrument. He can play. Rich Wiener could play all over the xylophone. Was alarmingly good. So, does that answer your question, Jacob? It really is not difficult to do. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of saying no, right? I mean, this is the way I looked at it. I had 4 years to get a job. I went to grad school because I didn't get a job. I didn't go to undergrad to go to grad school. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's a waste of money. You don't start undergrad, then I'm going to go to grad school. Why would you do that? Don't you want to work? So if you go to school that way, then it changes your seriousness when you play, when you practice. And I think the hardest thing for most young players to say is no. N-O. Just no. Man, let's go hang out. You should think, let's think about that. How much time am I going to be hanging out? Will I get a job or will I be broke? I kept it very simple like that. It wasn't one of those things where I would sit around and brag about, well, I made a cut. You didn't win. That's nothing to brag about. No, there's nothing to sit around and have a beer and talk about your audition. You need to be practicing. So I think it really comes down to, Jacob, is how serious you are, or you just want to do it because it's kind of a cool thing to do. You need to really kind of everybody reevaluate why you're doing it. There are no jobs. And when we come out of this, who knows what it's going to look like? It's going to be crazy. Nobody knows. But one thing you can do is be ready. That's one thing my dad would always say. He said, son, when the opportunity comes, make sure you are ready. Don't not be ready. And so that's a little more maybe than you needed, Jacob. But I don't think it's difficult to be good. I think it's very difficult to say no. That's my opinion.
Hi.
Hi,
Mr. Adams, I had a question. You were talking about all the freelance gigs you got when you were in Florida and then Indianapolis. And you talked about how the orchestra job made that much easier. Were you getting calls, or were you going out and, basically, I guess, rustling up business? And it was just the fact that you had this job made them much more likely to hire you for that. Like, what was the process going into that?
Well, okay, I can tell you in college, I played a lot of drum set in college. And one of the percussionists in school had a group called Tranquility Vibes. And I ended up playing drums because the drummer got sick. So I ended up playing a lot of drums. And then people hear you play drums, you get more drums. Now, in Florida, I taught I taught 3 high schools. I wrote the book for 3 high schools, and also taught Florida Wave. I taught a drum corps. And the reason I did all those things is I didn't want to go on unemployment. It's that simple. Why would I go on unemployment and I can go work? So I would just hustle like crazy during the year. So those were my extra gigs. And so I would approach schools and everywhere. I was like, yeah, sure, we'd love to have you. It's like the symphony guy knows marching band. Well, yeah, no, I'm a drummer. But they don't know that. So I ended up getting 3 jobs, and then I would teach 3 band camps and make like a lot of money in 1 week. That would take me through the summer and then half the fall. So I was always kind of, I guess, entrepreneurial, but it was more like, I don't want to be broke. And the same thing in Indianapolis. I had high school then. It just got too busy. The orchestra was really big, and I had no time to do it. But I always played drums, and so I would go to these clubs and sit in. And then one day, this guy Rob Disco said, "Man, you want to play in my group?" I'm like, "Yep." And that's how that happened. So if you get a job, you need to go to where the musicians are. You don't ever have to give out a card. Just walk up to somebody and go, "Man, I really enjoyed it." Go, "Oh, nice. What's your name?" "Oh, my name is Jeremy." "Nice. What do you play, Jeremy?" "I play drums." "Really?" And I guarantee you 3 or 4 times in, someone goes, "What are you doing Thursday night?" It literally happens that way. And it will happen that way wherever you go. You just go to where the musicians play. You will always find work because everybody's looking for someone that's nice and that can play.
I'd love just to add to Tim what you've said, a couple of suggestions for everyone.
Yeah, please.
The first being, I used my master's recital. I ended up going to Juilliard for my master's degree. I used that as my calling card into the city of New York, where no one knew who I was other than, as Tim describes, I was going to everybody's gig and introducing myself. And I was backstage at Carnegie Hall for every orchestra that came through, international. Oftentimes, I didn't even speak the language of the timpanist, but I, using sign language, I was able to introduce myself. And what I found is that if you use either your senior recital or your master's recital as your calling card, that's your introduction into the music world. You are saying to the world, I am a musician and I would like to show you what it is that I can play, what music I can play. So what I did is I had joined the union, Local 802. And when you join the union, you get the union book. And in the union book, at the time that I was at school, there were about 800 drummers, percussionists in the Local 802 union book. So this was the day before the internet. I know you're all shocked, but there was a time where you had to put a stamp on a envelope in order to get something to somebody. And what I did is I went through the Local 802 union book and addressed to each percussionist in that union book, I didn't know any of them, inviting them to my recital at Juilliard. And I know there were a lot of people that I didn't know, because I got returned in the mail probably 5 letters that said deceased. Not a great part of the story, but so I was sending it to people who were no longer alive as well. So you get the idea. I was throwing my nets out. Nobody knew who I was. So how are you going to get people to know? Now, the end result was I had a crowd. People showed up. I don't even know why. They had nothing else to do, or they wanted to see some young percussionist and what was going on at Juilliard. Every one of you, wherever you are in the world, you can do the same thing. And I highly recommend it, because for me, it worked. It was my calling card. And from that point forward, of course, the recital is over. It went very well. And I had a great time. Danny Druckmann played with me, and Bill Mersch and I had commissioned a piece, and it was all my buddies. And afterwards, when there were people who came to the recital and they introduced themselves, I followed up. I sent them a thank you card saying, I was very grateful that you came to my recital. Thanks so much. And someday, I hope, I'm going to keep my eye out. And if you're playing someplace, I'm going to find you and I'm going to come and watch you play in a club. Gordon Gottlieb was playing with French Toast down at a club down on 7th Avenue. Gordon didn't know who I was. He was the main guy in New York City. You had to go through Gordon if you were going to work. And I kept going down to 7th Avenue South, down to this club to hear him play with French Toast, which is where Danny Gottlieb first played and Michel Camillo played. This was a fusion band in which a French horn player, Peter Gordon, was the leader. And here's how I got to know Gordon Gottlieb. Not even though that I was going down to this club. I went 4 or 5 times. The third time I sat at a table. They sit you in New York. You sit down and, you're a kid. And I sat at the table with his mom, with Mrs. Gottlieb. And we began chatting. I didn't know who she was. And she said, oh, who are you? And I'm a Juilliard, I'm studying with, oh, well, my son, Gordon, who's playing in this band, he studied with Goodman too. And I said, well, I know. I knew all this. I became friends with Gordon's mom from sitting at the bar before I became friends with Gordon. But I became very good friends with Gordon and remained so. So I get off track. Tim, you stay on track so well. I get off track. Use your recital opportunity. instead of, unless your teachers say you got to play Schwantner and you got to play velocities and you got to play, here are the pieces you must play. I've always thought of that as my first creative opportunity to show the music world who I was, the music I liked, the music that I wanted to play at that particular time, which also changes all the time.
One thing my dad would always say, he said, you know, son, when people are playing music or whatever they're doing, he says, they typically go home alone. You think they're going to some party or, no, they're going home. They're on the road. And to give you a good example, Arturo Sandoval was playing with us. I went to Arturo after the first rehearsal, and I said, man, I'm a huge fan. He goes, oh, thank you. I said, man, if you need anything, let me know. That's all I said. He said, can you take me to a bookstore? I went, yeah. I took him to a bookstore, and for the next 5 days, I was with him every night till 2 a.m. Every night. And for about 3 or 4 years, whenever you come to Pittsburgh, Timmy, I'm coming to town. And all I did was say, man, if you need anything, let me know. Because I know what it's like. You're on the road. Nobody, you know. He said, yeah, can you take me? I took him to a bookstore and we talked. I learned so much. And for 5 days, I was with that man till like 2 a.m. Timmy, what do you want to go eat? I said, what do you want to have? Italian, let's go over here. Timmy, where do you want to eat? Where you want to go? And literally, and that's happened so many times in my career. Like Jonathan said, I'm not trying to get in good with them or try to get a gig. It's just, I know you're alone. You don't have a car. You might be famous, but you don't have any wheels. You can't go anywhere. You're stuck at the hotel. Man, can you take me to Whole Foods? Yeah, man, I want to get some kombucha. I'll take you. You know, just basic things. But I really, man, be nice to people. Jeremy, that's how you get work. And be honest.
Yeah. So, I wanted to know about career paths for those that are have an interest in becoming a Broadway pit musician. And I ask this because, you know, coming from the lower Rio Grande Valley, we don't get those kinds of opportunities down here. Really, there's nothing of any musical sustenance down here. And, you know, even deciding to go into music alone for me was, you know, everyone was like, what are you doing? You shouldn't do that. But anyway, so, you know, at an early age, I became interested in musical theater per se after I watched the 25th anniversary concert at the Royal Albert Hall of the Phantom of the Opera, and that was like life-changing for me. You know, it was something that, you know, really made me excited. I was like, this is so cool. Like, wow. It's like, you know, it's like a movie, but like they do it several times, and like I just thought it was so awesome.
One thing that I know that's important, because I've done some shows, is you must be a great sight reader, period, on all the instruments. So work on your sight reading and be able to play changes. Like be able to play, you know, legitimately play changes. Know how to play hand drums. Don't play bongos with a stick. Don't play congas with some yarn mallows. Don't do it. I mean, know how to play pandero. I mean, know how to play guica. Know how to play really know how to play the percussion instruments, and then know electronics. Know how to play hand sonic, octopad. Know some things. You know how to program loops. You know, those things I know you need, because, you know, a lot of times you get a book that thick, and you get it the day before, or somebody gets sick and you have to sub. That's all I got to say. I know that much. Jonathan, whatever thing Jonathan says, do that.
Tim already said it. The requirements on Broadway in this day and age, when I got to New York, Broadway was the graveyard shift. No one wanted to do Broadway. If you did it, you did it for the money. There was no glory. The musicians basically were dialing it in, and it was a very sad state of affairs. And it did not bode well for people having careers that they do now. And Broadway is now a $2 billion industry, less the COVID situation. In other words, it's a very, very, very successful endeavor. And I highly recommend it, but not as a goal for you to come to New York to get on Broadway, because that rarely, if ever, happens. It's to immerse yourself in musical theater, because musical theater nowadays, because of all the bus and truck shows, the road shows, they're going to come through your town, or at least within 100-mile radius. Miss Saigon is going to be coming by, and you need to be at that show in the audience or at the stage door meeting the percussionist who is playing that book. And already now you have made yourself a connection. And then if the show comes through town and you have taken Tim's most informative information, which is you got to be a sight reader, you got to read, because you only have 1 2.5-hour rehearsal to get Miss Saigon together. And you got to be able to play 25 different instruments. So you already went to Ghana, and you went to Mumbai, and you went to Indonesia, and you went to Japan, and you went to China. You did all of the things that you needed to do to immerse yourself. Or at your school, you have a master drummer who can teach you. So if this type of travel right now, none of us could do anyway, you still can get this information if you love it and you're into it. Then when you play in a regional show in your town, your hometown, and word gets back to the New York contractor, because all shows, I'll be careful, I won't say all, but the majority of them the shows are coming out of New York City in the United States. Word will get back to the contractor, hey, we had Edric Salazar played Saigon. Boy, he came in, he was cooperative. What a great guy. We loved him. Now, you'll never know that that's what's being said about you, but that's what you want people saying about you. You were a great colleague. There were problems in the pit. People were very uptight, but you kept your cool. You kept your head together. Word is going to get back to a John Miller or to a Howie Joins or to some contractor who's putting people on the road. I include myself because this is part of my career as a contractor. Then what happens is you go, you know what? I got to go to Broadway. I got to see what's going on. Then you're going to meet enough people who can make an introduction so you can go sit in the pit and watch Hamilton. And speaking of electronics, by the way, the percussionist is playing Hamilton is also triggering lighting cues and a whole bunch of crazy stuff, all electronic based. Tim, you're so spot on with this idea, not only the drum pads and Ableton and all of that technology, but oh my gosh, what you're maybe required to do, you want to be the guy who says, Ableton, not a problem. Oh, deal with a mallet cat? I got it. See what I'm saying? Now, you want to know specifics about where is there a location in which Broadway is being celebrated in a musical educational scene. And forgive me to everyone if this sounds self-serving, but I began a seminar at NYU called the NYU Broadway Percussion Seminar. And I started it 15 years ago because I saw a need and an interest in young folks such as yourselves, which is, what's it all about? But I don't live in New York, and I'm not moving to New York. I'm not going to go to school there, but I am dying to see what the heck's going on. So I started that seminar 15 years ago, and it has now grown beyond my wildest imagination. And 2 years ago, I had contracted and was playing with an orchestra, and we were rehearsing at Carroll's Studios in Manhattan. And John Miller, who is the #1 Broadway contractor, was in the lunchroom having a sandwich along with me. I had my orchestra going on, and he had some Broadway show and rehearsals. And I had been inviting him as a guest at my round table at the end of this Broadway percussion seminar, just to talk about the things we're talking about. And I said to him, hey, John, why don't we start a Broadway orchestra program at NYU. And Miller says, great idea. Now, what we didn't know is that the third person in the lunchroom was Ted Sperling, who is the #1 Broadway conductor. And he says, what about me? And we go, what do you mean, what about you? You're the most famous Broadway conductor. How would you have time to do something like this? And he said, I'll make time. So 2 years ago, we founded the NYU Broadway Orchestra program, which is throughout the entire year. And Miller is using that orchestra to recruit those musicians, those students who are up to the task, either to go on the road or to start subbing or like that. So oftentimes one would say, I'm going to go to the Manhattan School of Music. Well, what's one of the reasons? Well, maybe Chris Slam will start using me to play with the Philharmonic. It's possible. Or I'm going to go to Juilliard, and Marcus will say, you know what? I got this great student, and he's going to play second timpani in Mahler too. When I was a student in St. Louis, that's how I began playing with the St. Louis Symphony. I was a student, but I was studying with all the guys in the orchestra, and I worked like crazy. Tim and I were cut from the same cloth. We got to where we got because of we desired so much to be a part of this world, but we needed to be successful because starving was not an option. Right, Tim? I mean, that didn't seem anything pleasant about starving. So you work hard, you got the goods, you love doing it, things will come to you, but you're going to have to apply yourself. The phone's not going to ring anymore. There's too many of us musicians in the world for there to be that need for somebody to go like, well, you know, I'll just call the person. You have to apply yourself. Tim, I want to make sure that we get on to the Music 846 project. Do you think this would be a good time for you to introduce to all of us your many plans?
Yeah, sure. So this is something I've been thinking about actually for the past year and a half. I spent 31 years playing in orchestras, and I can count on my hand the number of Black composers that I played, or a piece that had the subject being a person of color. So I thought, you know what? I want to be that person. I want to write music for that. And so I was in the process of getting a commission to write a triple percussion concerto for the Buffalo Phil. And the topic was going to be on immigration. And so then COVID hit. And then, I see all these, these Black people getting killed. And that's been going on since 1619. This is really nothing new. But, I was trying to figure out, why am I so emotional? It's because I have a 4-year-old son. I don't want him in 11 years to be scared. So I thought, what could I do to do something that's healing, that potentially make the world better for my son in 11 years? So I thought, well, I need to write about it. And so I thought, I'm a percussionist. So I contacted Zildjian, Sabian, Dream, and Meinl, and I asked each company to donate 4 cymbals, one for Ahmaud Arbery, one for George Floyd, one for Breonna Taylor, one for Heather Heyer. And I'm going to write a piece that's 8 minutes and 46 seconds long. That's the amount of time that cop had his knee on George Floyd's neck. And I'm going to write a piece about that. And each one of those symbols represented. And Mapex and Pearl is going to donate gear. I'm going to write a piece using all that gear. And at that point, I said, I'm not coming to you. I'm not asking you guys as a Pearl artist or Zildjian artist. It's just a man, African-American man that wants to do something to make this world better. And everybody's like, we'll send you whatever you want. So I'm going to this with my duo partner, Dwayne Dawkins, a bass player. He's Grammy-winning player. He played with Nancy Wilson and Maceo Park and Fred Wesley and Marcellus Quartet. So I'm going to write this piece, and that's the first project that kind of gets all of the percussion industry together. And then I was telling my very good friend Dan Myers, who's music director of Erie Philharmonic and the Blue Water Chamber Orchestra, about, I want to write some music. And he says, why don't I commission you? So I have a commission for spring 2022. I'm writing a piece about Harriet Tubman. I'm 98 bars in now. It's for strings and percussion. And I called Javon to talk to him about it. And the National Symphony is looking for composers to write these other pieces. So I'm in the process of, maybe doing some with them. And then I sent an email to Robert Spano, and he emailed me back the next day. Then someone from the ASO emailed me the next day. And I want to write a piece about Martin Luther King for the ASO. I'm not sure. We're talking, so we'll see how that goes. And so I just feel like then I'm writing a concerto for Leo Soto, fall 2022, a percussion concerto for Houston Symphony. And so I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 years writing music and writing music for big orchestras and for orchestras is really to try to change historically the kind of music that comes off the stage of orchestras. People forget that, Shostakovich's music is not happy music. He's upset. He's talking about Stalin. Most of the classical music, most of it is programmatic. Some of it's happy, but a lot of it's people that have a lot of angst in their life. Musicians have always been the storytellers of the world since biblical times, and I feel like this is what I want to do. I want to write music that's substantive, that has people thinking about where we live and to make it better. And so I reached out to Jonathan. I was telling him about it. So he's going to have a commission a piece that I write for percussion ensemble for NYU and Aspen Percussion Ensemble. Hopefully that'll be premiered spring 2021 and summer 2021. And it just seems like when your intent is good, opportunities come. And my intent is only to write this music. You hear that train? This happens all the time. My intent is to write music to make a world a better place for my son. And so my intent, that's the only intent of the purpose of the project. And so opportunities to be worked, to come to me, because I'm not doing it to become a composer or to make a lot of money. It's one purpose. In my mind, I have 11 years to make the world better for my son. Is it idealistic? Well, of course it is. You have to be. Someone has to be. But I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. And that's what I'm doing. And it's one of those things where I was saying, you have the courage to do something, and I'm not afraid to fail at it. I wrote a concerto for violin and percussion. I've never done that before. Someone asked, I think Jonathan, maybe he says, now have you had composition lessons? Like, yeah, man, since I was in the 8th grade, Debussy, Strauss, Ravel, Detieu, Boulez. Yeah, I've had a lot of composition lessons right there. And I've been paying attention. All those years I was playing, I was paying attention. I always wanted to understand why the strings having problems. Why can he not do this? Why is it so easy for clarinets to play so soft? Why? And so, I'm starting to write music. I understand the ins and outs of how an orchestra works, and I'm trying to be logical and smart about it. I know if I get commissions, they won't have a lot of rehearsal time. 1 rehearsal, 2 if I'm lucky, because I played in orchestras all the time. You don't write it so hard that people can't play it. Nobody's going to rehearse it. Nobody's going to practice your part. They're going to read it. So I'm going in not like a composer. I'm going in like, okay, these people are not going to like this, so let me just write it. And then and as long as the message is emotional, my intent is to move the audience, not move the orchestra. And so I'm being very, very clear in my mind why I'm doing this. So it's making it not easy to write. It's making it more organized for me to write. So the whole idea is that every piece will be 8 minutes and 46 seconds long. That'll be the amount of music that will be played. But I'll make it 10 minutes. So there'll be 77 seconds of dialogue in the front, 77 seconds of dialogue in the back, and then music in the middle. So, it all ties in. And I want to give myself those parameters because that forces me to create in a particular way. And so that's essentially the project. And I'm going to spend the rest of my career doing that. And I think it's important for me to do it for my son. And I'm very honored and blessed. Jonathan wants to help me. And every time I reached out to people, the response has been the same. I wrote an email to Andy Zildjian. I've never met Andy Zildjian. And He wrote back, he said, whoa, Tim, no reason for the hard sell. What do you need? And so same with Craig. Craig said, yeah, what do you need? We exchange emails like at 10 to 12 at night. So it lets you know what people's heart really are. And, this pandemic and everything that's going on, it's important that it happens. And it's important that we as musicians are aware and to make our voices heard. If anybody's going to change it, it's a musician. It's not going to be a politician. Of course, you need policies to change, but you need people's humanity to change. And you do that by music. And that's the kind of things you can think about as percussionists. What can I do to make the world better? Write some music. You don't need to have a composition degree, right? Most people that have composition degrees, they can't write. Well, they can, but you know what I mean. So don't let that inhibit you. But you want to do something that's important, that it helps your life be better. Then write about it, because we need the artist to be the spokesman for the world. We need that. I mean, just notice. I mean, when I hit leave, I got 4 pair of sticks to cover, and then I got to write at least 18 bars. I mean, you do music when you can. You have a family, whatever you're doing, but you got to get done. You have to get it done, and that's the beauty of being a musician. You can just do music all the time. It's always there. It's the greatest profession on the planet. And I think, and I totally agree with Jonathan. If you want to do something for this world, whether it's political activism or whatever you want to do, the first thing I would please beg you to do is be good. Like, be able to play your instrument, because dealing with yourself in the practice room helps you deal with your humanity. If you can play, then you have some kind of humanity, because you can't play well unless you play from the heart. So if you're actually good at what you do, you will be socially conscious by default. You will. You just won't. You won't allow people to be treated poorly, and you won't allow people to say something that's not quite right about somebody when they're next to you. When you're really good at what you do. If you're mediocre, you'll follow the crowd and buy into anything. But if you're really good, it won't sit well for you. So it's very fascinating how it really kind of informs your aesthetic as a human being, how well you can play your instrument. Like, people that I know that are really great, they're really intelligent. That's just by default. I got lucky. I don't know how intelligent I am, but you just want, but you want to be good, and when you're good at it, it really does inform your humanity. I have my teachers too, as prime examples of that. 2, bless their soul, they're gone, but the one that's still here, and my 2 that are still here, their humanity is so unbelievably great. And I know it's because they can play. So, I mean, I would really encourage you to be really great at what you do, and that does something to your aesthetic, to your person, and to your heart. That's all I got to say.